everybody. Welcome to ABA Inside Track, the podcast that's like reading in your car, but safer. I'm your host, Robert Perry Cruz, here to introduce a very special live recording. Now, for those of you who are new to the show, ABA Inside Track is a podcast where we discuss research related to behavior analysis. And this special episode is a live recording that we did at one of our fabulous local centers for children with autism, the Autism Community Therapists, which is a great company owned by Kevin Schlickenmeyer. And he invited us out and said, why don't you come out and do a live recording for some of my staff? And we were just overjoyed at the request. And of course, went out and had a great time meeting everyone there and did a live recording. So what you're going to hear next is that recording, but just in case there were any weird audio hiccups, because I haven't had a chance to do all the editing, all that stuff yet, I want to make sure that our listeners can hear what articles are discussed at the event itself. And they are all on, since, again, the Autism Community Therapists, or Tacts, is the name of the company, we thought, let's do an episode all on tacts. So our articles are The Effects of Alternating Mand and Tact Training on the Acquisition of Tacts by Carroll and Hesse from the Analysis of Verbal Behavior, 1987. Then Effects of Mand-tact versus Tact-only Training on the Acquisition of Tacts by Arntzen and Almas from the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis in 2002. And finally, Acquisition of Mands and Tacts with Concurrent Echoic Training by Kodak and Clements from the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis, 2009. And without any further ado, let's go to our live ABA Inside Track recording. All right, so I'm going to play, Dinah's making me play the theme song, and then we'll get started.
Are we allowed to laugh?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Clap?
definitely.
Are we allowed to boo?
Yeah.
You can move if you want to, yeah.
I appreciate the booze. I know, right?
Why are you... All right, well, hey, everybody. I'm your host of ABA Inside Track. Oh, I'm all off my script already.
I don't know what you're doing.
I'm going to do that again. So, hi, everybody. Hey, everybody. Welcome to...
Hey, everybody. There you
Yeah,
go. Hey, everybody.
Talk about stimulus control. I can only do it if I'm in my dining room. Hey, everybody. Welcome to ABA Inside Track. This is a live recording of the podcast that's like reading in your car, but safer. I'm your host, Robert Perry Cruz, and I have two people with me who are joining me for this special edition, and they are...
Hey, Rob, it's Diana.
Hey, it's Jackie. We're always with you, though.
You're always, no
you're
matter
never
where I
really
go,
special.
at the Starbucks, at my house, wherever we
In the
go.
bathroom.
Sometimes, yeah. So we are here live at TACT, the Autism Community Therapists, which I had to write down your acronym, guys, because TACT is perfect as a name. They are a fabulous company working with students with autism in Acton, Massachusetts, and they graciously offered to give us a space to do this recording for some other folks in the field. So thank you all very much for giving up some of your time to listen to us prattle on, and thanks for doing it here rather than our house. We could not seat more than a few of you. So we decided in honor of... Oh, I haven't even talked about, to the people who aren't live here, what we do on the show,
sure.
which I always forget to do anyway. So we're a podcast. We discuss behavior analysis and behavior analytic research. And every week we have a brand new topic that we will be discussing, or we discuss some articles related to the field. And in honor of being here at TACT, we thought, hey, or Diana, you thought this. So why don't you explain your thought process?
I thought, tact. Tacts! We could talk about tacts and how we work to establish tacting behavior.
And
That was it.
Yeah. That was a pretty straightforward process there.
Yep.
But it was
like a
light
free
bulbing.
association thing. Yeah.
So that's what we're going to do. We're going to be talking about tacts and the acquisition of tacts. So we're going to talk about 3 articles, and I'm going to read them off to you, and then I'm going to put these articles out of my way. Uh-oh, that's the 4th one. So we're going to be talking about The Effects of Alternating Mand and Tact Training on the Acquisition of Tacts by Carroll and Hesse from the Analysis of Verbal Behavior, 1987. Show of hands, who here was alive in 1987?
Uh-oh.
Oh, that is not...
Oh, gosh, guys. It's just us.
So we know our demographic skews a little younger than we do. Okay, well, how about effects of mand-tact versus tact-only training on the acquisition of tacts by Arntzen and Almas from 2002, the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis. Some of you were not BCBAs
Okay,
possibly yet?
okay.
Okay, good. So, but you remember that. You remember 2002. You remember all the tact and mand-tact training that was going on back then. And
was
then
the
we'll
style
be
at the
finishing up,
time.
going closer to the present day with acquisition of mands and tacts with concurrent echoic training by Kodak and Clements. And that's also from the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis, 2009. So we're taking a trip down memory lane to talk about all the ways you can train tacts. Well, not all the ways. We're talking about two, basically.
Just 2 ways, actually.
Just 2 ways. So why don't we start off with a little review, just for those of you who have, if you were like me and you studied the verbal behaviors section of Cooper, Heron, and Heward right before you went in to take your certification test, what a tact is and what a mand is in technological language.
No, I actually just want Rob to give himself some credit here because maybe you did a little, what's that word?
Give me more context, please.
Cramming? Ooh,
Yes, cramming.
You're
There
good.
we go.
Cramming for the test, but then after that, you went back and you're the only person on earth that read verbal behavior in its entirety for fun.
It wasn't for fun. It was
not for your master's degree.
No.
It was not for your PhD.
No.
It was on your own time.
Yeah, I did.
You did not get paid.
Bedtime reading.
No. So now that we've outed
you.
Rob
That's
as
so
the biggest
sweet.
nerd.
You got to learn about that sometime. You got to read verbal behavior sometime.
What were we talking about?
We were going to define mands and tacts.
Oh.
Just in case anyone else has sort of been faking it and they're like, tacts, yes, tell me more. It's a place I work. Don't ask me any more questions,
I know what it
please.
is, but why don't you tell me to make sure you know?
Just in case.
Okay.
So again, I know what it is, but maybe you guys want to...
I think we even have to bring it all the way
I know.
back
I think we should too.
to talk about what a tact is part of. It's part of verbal behavior, right? So a verbal behavior emphasizes the individual speaker as well as specifies the behavior shaped and maintained by mediated consequences as in the listener, right? So that's something very interesting that Skinner brought about, that we both talk about the speaker and the listener, not just the speaker or the listener. It's both.
Back in 1957. Who was born? No, just kidding.
Nobody. And even though Skinner, when he wrote verbal behavior, who's read verbal behavior? Yeah, guys, yeah. Even though he wrote
Spoiler
verbal
alert,
behavior,
Black Scorpion. It takes forever to find out what that's supposed to mean.
it's funny. It takes into account the formal aspects of the response, but also the environmental circumstances that occasion the response for occurring, for the antecedent and the consequences under which the response topography occurs. So we're not just looking at what comes out, but why it comes out and why it might come out again.
Woo.
That sounded like bathroom talk. So, sorry about that. That's awesome.
That was good. Yeah. So I was pulling from the Carroll and Hesse article when I
Sure.
wrote my notes related to verbal behavior. So paraphrasing them, they said that the specific response forms, which have specific effects on another person, are how we help to characterize verbal behavior. And that all, like you already said, Jackie, that all relates back to verbal behavior really produces an effect on the environment through the listener versus the speaker, which is just so fascinating. And I know that I've heard this in the past, but of course I don't recall where, but maybe Skinner, probably Skinner, that the real power in verbal behavior is that you can do something that takes so little response effort on your part and produce great change on your environment through the action of others, which is pretty cool. And that's why man is at the top of the food chain.
Yeah,
verbal
that,
behavior.
That does sound a lot like Skinner.
It does, probably him.
Mhm,
Yeah,
yeah.
he was a pretty smart guy. So,
Yeah, and so there's a lot of different verbal operands. So there are the mand, the echoic, the tact, the interverbal,
And then there's some others, you know.
and some others.
We don't need
that-
to talk about those.
Yeah, but today we're going to focus on the mand and the tact. Yeah. So, what's a tact, Diana?
well, according to Carroll and Hesse, Jackie, a tact is, and I quote, verbal response whose form is controlled by a nonverbal discriminative stimulus.
Nice. One thing I like about the tact that I found fascinating when I read these articles was that it said it most directly benefits the listener, right? So that's something I wouldn't have thought about when I'm, when I'm reading things, that it's not for the speaker in and of itself, but it most benefits the listener. So I think that's nice.
Yeah, no, and I agree on that, but it's also like the behavior has to be maintained in some form, so it must still carry some function for the speaker. However, the function is not so clear and tangible as the function for a mand might be, right? So tacting behavior is likely maintained by social consequences or some type of social reinforcement by and large, and it can produce change on the part of the listener behavior. But what the speaker gets out of it is not always as clear.
Yeah. And so what about a mand, Diana?
Well, Jackie, a mand, as defined by Carroll and Hesse, is, and I quote, a verbal response whose form is controlled exclusively by a motivational variable. And we all know what that is.
Yeah, rather than the SD.
Yeah. So that's the real distinction that we're making here, is that for tact, there's some discriminative stimulus that might be a physical object in the environment, but it could also be a ephemeral event or sound that goes by outside, right? That's generally controlling the form of that verbal response. And then a mand is behavior that is controlled by having a particular motivational variable present. So an EO, if you are haven't eaten in a long time, then the response of eating is going to be a lot stronger, right? Food's going to be more reinforcing, so you're more likely to engage in behavior that produces food. And one type of behavior that produces food is manding for food. So asking someone for food, or you could just plow right through those people and go get it yourself. But if you're going to use verbal behavior, then manding is a nice way, the polite way.
That would be non-verbal behavior.
That's
plowing
right.
through a group of people in front of my food. So that doesn't quite count for today.
No. So there's multiple topographies of behavior that can produce a particular access to a reinforcer, and verbal behavior is just one of those, but that's the one that we're going to be talking about today.
And one thing to note, usually a verbal response is multiply controlled, right? So it may not be a pure tact or a pure mand. And it may be hard in the moment to figure out, is this a tact or a mand, right? Because sometimes it'll just be one word, right? Like Starbucks.
That did happen earlier today, and then just now, this lovely platter of food was brought in, and I said to Jackie, tuna salad sandwiches.
She did. So was she tacting? Did she see the SD and just say tuna salad sandwich and that was that? And I was like, you're right, Diana, that is a tuna salad sandwich. Nice job. Did that happen? Or was she having a disguised man so I could say, then walk over there and get her a tuna salad sandwich? That did not happen.
I have no tuna salad sandwich. I don't even know if that's what that is. It might be chicken.
Would you like it?
No, I'm good. It turns out it was just a tact. But there was no way for you to know, right? Because I just said tuna salad sandwiches. So it could have been a tact, could have been a mand. Very often when that occurs, there's multiple control happening there. So it's both a tact and a mand.
Yeah. So that's interesting.
And I think when we talk, for those of us in the field, which again is all of you out here in the audience, we think about when we first started in the field, we started training, we would usually train tacts and mands, and we think about them as, two, as they are, functionally independent operants. And we think, well, the way you teach tact or mand is you do mand training or you do tact training. And then after, a couple hundred trials with a few students, you're like, wow, we've learned like 5 mands, 2 tacts, depending on the student. And you say, is this really how everyone learns language? And you think back to when you were a child and you're like, I don't think this is how I learned all the words and all the different verbal operants I know. I must have learned them some other way. But of course, we don't remember most of that because a lot of it happened when we were, very small. We humans learn words at a very, very rapid pace when they're typically developing. So then you probably had the thought that all of the authors in these journal articles had of, well, there's got to be a better way to do this, as opposed to just, I'll sit here and I'll hold up various pictures for my student, and then I'll, say what it is, and they'll repeat me, and I'll say high five, or I'll give them a piece of edible, and then I'll take, a toy that they love, and I'll hold it over their head and go, oh, you can't have this, and they'll jump for it, and you won't give it to them.
Don't do that.
Until they say what it is, and then you give it to them. You say, you've manded, great job, and you give them just 20 seconds. Then you snatch it away again, and you do it again. You hold it in front of them. And, that's...
Yeah, we're not... We're not supporting that.
No.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's one way you could do it. I don't know if your student would really enjoy. They'd find you very aversive if that's the only way you ever really communicated with them. So there must be some other way that we can teach children of any developmental level different verbal operants that goes beyond just I'm going to sit and kind of do the drill and kill, which is great when you're just starting in the field. But as you progress in the field, there's always a more efficient way to teach.
And one thing, when I was a newly minted BCBA, well, I guess not a BCBA, newly minted therapist, I assumed that mands and tacts were interdependent or dependent on each other. So if I taught Starbucks, because I'm looking at it and love it, then if I knew what that is Starbucks, I could obviously ask for it if I wanted it, right? Because I knew that that's what it was. But that's not always the case, which is interesting. So I just assumed that, but now we know, based on the research, that tacts and mands are independent, and so we actually have to teach those two skills separately or together, but we have to teach them, and we just can't assume one or the other based on the knowledge of the other.
Yeah. Because you'd think, well...
But he knows it.
He knows it, everyone!
Yeah.
Do you guys hear that?
Oh, sorry. You're making a joke or a point, and I totally blew it. I'm sorry. What were you saying?
I don't know what I was saying, but I do hear that sometimes, right? So you'll be working with someone and the therapist will say, but they know it. I know that they know it, because sometimes you can see behavior occur in one context. Like, I know that they can point out to me the water bottle, right? But they aren't necessarily asking for it, or often vice versa. You'll see, they can man for this thing in the natural environment, but they're not tacting it in a more controlled setting. So the point that all of us are just making is the same one, which is that those two responses are functionally independent of one another. So we cannot assume that just because we taught the tact that the mand is going to be present in a different context, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes one of the things that might make us think, well, yeah, I know. I either read verbal behavior, or I was told about it, or I read the section in the textbook about it. I know that operants, they're functionally independent, but I'm pretty sure someone once said one word in some context, and then I was able to magically use that word across all the different operant forms. Therefore, I assume everyone can do that. And while that certainly, can happen, you're not necessarily taking into account the fact that there were probably a lot of other stimuli that were occurring at the same time, or the way the operant was presented to you was one that allowed for generalization that you weren't planning on. So it's not as simple as just, if you hear it in a context, I'm sure you'll be able to use that word in all different contexts again across all the operant forms, and all the operants, and that'll be real easy. So how can we kind of capture some of those those moments to try to make tact training more efficient?
Hi everyone, Rob here. I'm just interrupting the live recording to give you one of our secret code words. In case you didn't know, ABA Inside Track is ACE approved. So by listening to the episode, you can go to our website, abainsidetrack.com, click Get CEUs, and you can order CEs from us. You are going to need to know the two secret code words that are hidden throughout the episode. And the first of those is Raven, R-A-V-E-N, Raven. Like quoth the Raven, nevermore. Raven. All right, and back to the episode.
So, I think good on background. Let's get into our articles.
Okay.
Cool.
And Dana, you're starting us off with
Carroll and Hesse.
Carroll and Hesse.
Back in 87.
Before anyone was born here. I was
pretty busy in 87.
Picture it, 1987.
Pound puppies were cool.
Cabbage Patch Kids ruled the nation.
My Cabbage Patch Kid had blonde yarn pigtails, and her name was Penelope. And that was what I was doing in 1987. But Carroll and Hesse were doing something much more important, which was building upon some previous research that they'd already laid some really good groundwork, even of 1987, as far as what should we really do to best teach tacting. And what they had already discovered through previous research by folks such as Stafford and colleagues in 1978 and Hall and Sundberg also in 1987. So they must have been talking before publication.
Besties.
Yep. Is that research supported teaching mands first. So individuals were more likely to learn tacts when they had previously learned how to mand for that item.
Because mands are the best.
But why, Rob? Why do you think mands
because if I'm manned for something, I am given something. I'm acting upon the environment and having it produce reinforcement for me. That's what I want out of life. I want to say things and then have other things happen to me. And I don't want to do very much more than that because there's not a lot of response effort.
You
in
there.
Producing
Bring me.
phonemes. Yeah.
Bring me a donut.
Yeah, you might not even say bring me. You can just say donut. No, it appears from
Here
somewhere.
it comes. Very good. Okay, so what you're possibly saying is that maybe mands are easier to acquire because a stronger MO is in place?
Yes, and then the
I
reinforcement
thought so.
is typically immediate and very salient for the moment. When you say water and it's a mand and water appears, that's exactly what I wanted. That was the thing that the neurons in my body signaled I needed water. I said it and it appeared. That's so great. Like you don't get much more reinforcing than that. Coffee, great job.
You don't even have to say
not
great
good.
job,
I
right?
got
You just have
coffee.
to give the coffee. Like the great job is just extraneous at that point.
No, but if
But
I
if-
just tacted it,
Oh yeah,
if I just had coffee and you say pat on the head, it's like, oh, that's nice.
that's true.
Right, so the reinforcer is not functionally related to the response
Sure.
in a tact situation, but it is in a man situation if that MO or EO is present. So it's possible.
Which it
that-
would be if it's for it to be a man.
True.
What?
Say what? Oh,
That's secretly the only page in verbal behavior I actually got for this stuff. Glad I could put it to use after all these years.
boom, we're done. Okay. Okay, we've made that point. So now I'm going to actually talk about what Carroll and Hesse did in their study, which is celebrating its 32nd anniversary this year. So the purpose of their study was to build upon the previous research, which was already suggesting that they were like on a good path here, right? They were like, we're pretty sure we know what's going to happen, but they wanted to expand and elaborate and tweak a few different things. But I picked this one because I liked the setup.
You wanted to massage those conditions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Massage. So the purpose here was to test their hypothesis, which was what they were pretty sure of, was that teaching mands was going to be effective at also producing tacts. But they wanted to test this by alternating mand and tact training together as compared to just a tact-only condition, okay? And they needed to do that so that they had an opportunity to test tacting in both conditions, but in one condition they also had added in this MO component as well in some of the trials. And they did that to determine the effect of the rate of task acquisition for these typically developing preschoolers was the population that they used here. So they had 6 participants. One of them was a girl, 5 of them were boys, all of them were ages 3 to 4, and they were attending a preschool for which our researchers had easy access.
And nondescript name, Child Development Center. That's what
Oh,
it
I'm
was
so
called.
sorry.
The Child Development Center. They were thoughtful in their name.
The CDC.
Yeah.
I got to get up to speed on that, I guess. Okay, sorry. So what they did here was they had 2 phases of their study, phase 1 and then phase 2. And in each phase, they taught the participants to assemble 2 different toys. So each toy was associated with either the tact-only condition or the mand plus tact condition. I wish we had more info about what these toys were, because they're like, yeah, there are some toys with a bunch of parts, and maybe they made a car or an animal
So they said they
or
could be
a
games.
game.
A game.
Like, what game are you? Like Mousetrap? It was 1987, actually. It might have been Mousetrap. You guys remember Mousetrap? The game
It's
no
still
one played,
around.
You just set up the trap, and then the trap went. Yeah.
Mine was broken and the thing fell down all the time.
You couldn't flip the man into the can?
I could
Well-
totally do that.
They did say crane one time.
But I don't think they built a crane. I was imagining
Example.
one of those like fossil
think
kit
it's like
sets
an-
you put together.
like
and you're
an
like,
erector
a
set?
dinosaur.
Yeah, I don't know. They just say
Remember
toys.
constructs?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Maybe constructs? We don't really know. So that's
don't
the
know.
problem, is we don't have enough info.
The most important piece
So-
of research.
I know. So technological, we got a ding, because I can't imagine what the toys looked like.
The only one they
Which
mentioned
maybe
was
that's not
crane.
important, but I want to know. I just want to know.
Yeah, but I don't think it was a crane because they were trying to pick.
It was a piece. The part of it would look like a crane.
Okay,
It had like an arm, is what I'm thinking. Had
But
an
you know
arm.
what? I was thinking it was a crane like a bird the
I
whole
was
time I
too.
read this.
I was too.
Like they built
You
a
guys.
crane.
And then they were
gave
miss-
the kid like the 30 seconds
Yeah.
to play with it. And they
Me
just were like,
too.
it's a crane.
Me
Look at
too.
that.
I don't know what you're reading, Diana.
All right, kids.
Yeah.
Okay, so they for each of the 4 toys, they had 3 pieces that were removable, at least 3, right? And they gave those 3 pieces names. So in the first phase, the names were kind of what you might imagine they would be called, right? So it was like crane, cradle, and receiver, or something like that. So they were names
Ejector, torso,
Yep.
coupling. I wrote my favorites down.
Those are,
But torso, like, ugh,
Torso.
What are you building, kid?
maybe it's an animal.
Ringer.
So again,
That's my favorite.
They're building things that
Right.
the kids might have like heard that, and might be able to figure out what they're calling these
Yes,
things.
exactly. Okay, so that was phase 1, but they were names that the kids didn't already know. They couldn't identify those parts by those names, okay? And then in phase 2, they said, ooh, maybe we didn't do that quite right. So in phase 2, they made the names completely non-functional. So they were nonsense words such as Waldorf, Binkle, and Pinnacle. That's a real word.
I liked the Tarman.
So is Waldorf. It's a
Like
hotel.
a delicious Waldorf salad.
yeah,
Yeah.
or the hotel.
It has apples in it.
Basting was another one.
Okay.
That's what I asked for Christmas in 1987. Basting and maybe a Binkle if they ran out.
All right. So we went through several conditions with this study. The first was a pre-chaining condition in which they were just taught how to put the toy together, right? And it ended up looking like maybe a crane.
Are you still having about Binkle?
We lost her.
These are the jokes, folks.
All right. And then the training, I've already kind of described to you guys, right? So phase 1, half of the 6 kids did the tact-only with one of their toys first, and then they did the mand and tact training together, which I'll tell you guys what that is in a sec. And then the other group did the mand and tact first, and then did the tact-only. And then they repeated the whole thing with phase 2. Okay?
Actually quite confusing when they talk about it in the article, though,
But-
because you did a good job.
Thank you.
But they were like, and there's multiple conditions, but there's really not.
I know.
There's
No.
just 2.
But then
They're
they
like, there's
added in this
5 conditions. I was like,
hand-typed
yeah.
table.
Mimeograph.
Which I
and
know
all.
our audience cannot see, but you could look it up, and it makes it all like super clear.
Yeah.
So that's how I know what's going on.
Me too. I looked and I was like, what is happening? I'm like writing it all down. I'm like, where are all the other conditions? And then I was like, oh, there isn't any. They just talked about it poorly.
And, it sort of had that feel of like phase 1 actually wasn't that bad, but they made a phase 2, and you're like, ooh, what did they change? And it's like, oh, they kind of just crammed in a lot of sessions together because school was running out, so they just wanted to get their experiment done.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah, so,
So that's the difference.
They're like,
in the name.
uh-oh. Yeah.
What they were teaching,
yes, exactly.
targets.
That's a good point. I didn't bring that up. In phase 1, they taught the tact and then the mand-tact first. And then in phase 2, they taught both. So they just went back and forth
Within a session.
Yeah.
within a session. Yep. Okay. And then in the tact-only condition, they put one of the pieces of the toy on the table and they said, what is this? And they taught the child through least to most prompting, basically, to say, it's a Waldorf. And they said, that's right. Great job. And then they took it away. And they did that for 6 trials, so 2 of each of the things.
But one thing they did do is intersperse those trials with mastered criteria to make sure that they were far enough away from each other. Because, right, what is this crane?
Yeah.
What is this crane? What is this crane? That's not really assessing anything. So they did intersperse.
Yes, they did.
Yeah.
Things like touch your nose and what's your name and those types of things. And then in the mand-tact training, the reinforcer was different here. So they got the piece of the toy, right? So they had the toy initially. They played with it for a minute. But they couldn't put the whole thing together because part of it was missing. So then they were taught to mand for, I need the Waldorf, or they just had to say Waldorf. They got the piece. They knew how to assemble it because they'd been taught how to put the toy together, and then they got to play with it for a second. Then the experimenter took the whole thing away, took off a different piece of the toy, and gave it back to them.
I can imagine the preschool students were crying at that moment. Right? Can you imagine, like, I just built this awesome thing, and now the guy's, like, taking it off and being like,
Rip it up.
what is this? Right?
The experiment did have that. When you're reading, you're like, yes, this makes sense as an experiment. But when you think about how a child would respond,
Be
it's
like,
like, what do you like? Do you do that with a kid? You're like,
Yeah.
build this thing. Now play with it. Now I'm taking it. Now what's that? Now build it again. Go. I mean, like, what kid wouldn't be like, what? I don't want to play this game
Right.
anymore. Just give me the Binkle and let me leave.
So those kids are 35 now, so we should find them and ask them. Dear children, if you're listening,
That's some social validity.
yeah,
All
are you
right.
still haunted
They
when
loved it.
someone's
They all
taking
became
your toy?
BCBAs. when
Right.
they were adults.
All right, so they taught across those 2 conditions for both of the phases. Like Rob said, the second phase, they were like, oh no, we have to hurry this thing up because the school year is going to end. So that's why they like mixed the trials together, and not everyone got through all of phase 2, but kind of nice to see that stuff in print too.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I feel like now they wouldn't have admitted that it was because the school year was going to end. They'd be like, we just decided to change it. But they were like very upfront about, they're like, we had to get this done. So they did that. And then they did go back and do a maintenance check at the end. They basically just represented all the pieces and checked to see if the child tacted them.
The retention
Yes, they
test.
called it retention. I called it maintenance. Da-da-da-da-da. Results was that all of the participants learned the tacts faster. They were measuring trial-stick criterion for tacting when the tacts were embedded within the mand-tact condition. All 5 of 6 who got through, one of them stopped coming.
I wonder why.
That one was crying.
Yeah, right.
I just really wanted to play with my baster.
So the results that they found fit in really nicely with the previous research. They brought up some good questions in this article, I think, about, you know, what's the function of the manding versus tacting. Manding, they got to not only get the piece, but it was then built into playing with the toy, so there's a much larger reinforcer in there. And then they talked about, with the tacting, they had these artificial interrupters to the session where they had to stop them and say, what's your name? How old are you? Things like that. And then with the manding condition, there was the same amount of time interrupter, but the interrupter was playing, right? So much different quality to the session and potentially much larger or varying types of reinforcement available too. So that left them with some questions. But overall, the general consensus here was if you want to teach tacting, you should teach it in the context of manding as well.
Dana, Jackie, can you hold up the graph? Because this graph was a lot. I want you to just describe it verbally while everyone is watching. I want to see how good you can do.
Oh, you can't even look at it?
Wait, can Jackie look at it?
No, like just generally describe what the graph
Me?
was. Just generally. You don't have to go result by result. I'm just curious.
Can she look at it or no?
Okay.
No, just like you don't have to do every result like participant 1 had, but just like generally.
But can she
kind
look?
of like above my pay grade.
But wait, can she look at the graph?
No, I just thought
Okay.
it was.
Okay,
Go for
fine.
it. Let's see what you do.
Participant 1, I think, did tacting first.
Oh no, I just meant like the setup because it is not a kind of graph
All right.
style that I would see, and it took me a while just staring at it like there's a lot of
so
lines.
on the x-axis, there were the 3 stimuli for each of the conditions, right? So the tacting only, and then the mand-tact. And then on the y-axis was the trials-stick criterion for the tact response specifically.
And the mean average.
And each stimulus was represented by the total trials-stick criterion across all sessions, and then they also had a mean line represented by a horizontal bar across the bars. A horizontal line across the bars. So if you can see that far, you can sort of get a feel, right? And what you will notice across all the participants who made it to the end of the study is that the mean bar for the tact-only condition is higher than the mean line for the mand-tact condition. How was that?
That was perfect.
Yeah, I can't believe that.
I stared for I'm gonna yay.
Oh, thank you. Oh.
Because I know I stared at that graph for a while. And I was like, where's the rest of the multiple baseline? They kind of forgot the second half of the graph. Because I was like, oh, it's a mean line. It's very odd.
Like, it's upside down.
I don't like when they do that. I want my graphs to look like the same 2 that are in about 90% of research, like nice
Yeah,
and
well,
easy
the
to
farther back you go
understand.
in the research, the greater variety there are.
Man, 1987 was a dark time for graphs,
Those
I
were
guess.
the Wild West.
I don't even remember what the chart, they had a
This
table.
is the retention table.
Oh, okay, that was
So-
We
cool.
didn't talk about that. They did better retending them with
Pretending.
with the mand-tact.
What was the
tacts.
generalizability of their retention
Okay,
ability?
but the other caveat here is that they didn't test phase 1 and phase 2 until the end of phase 2. So
And they didn't test all of the
I think they were
objects,
probably like,
just some
shoot,
of them.
that was
you see,
not great.
The X's are the ones that they tested. The ones that don't have X's, they
I think some of them were not acquired though.
right, yeah.
Yeah.
They,
Yeah, so
they
anyway.
didn't get them.
And they sort of jammed it. I mean, and they mentioned that as a limitation. They
They're like,
weren't.
"It's the last day
they
of
sort
school."
of jammed it in at the last day of school. Like,
We're
"Wait, before you
hot."
go,
Yeah.
What was this? What is it? What is it?
They're like running out the bus.
But wait,
What's this? Just tell me. I have to. They're like, I don't want to play with you anymore.
Yeah.
Keep stealing my toys.
But they did.
All right.
See some. They did see better retention for the
Yep.
tacts that were that came in the mand-tact training, though.
as we'll talk about, that doesn't necessarily mean that that is going to hold true for all participants for all time.
Sure.
I'm done.
Great. All right. Well, let's talk about the follow-up. I guess that's me. I'll do that. So we're talking about the Arntzen and Almas in 2002. So this basically was just an extension of the generality. So, hey, I guess no one's been doing anything with all these Carroll and Hesse results since 1987. Why don't we try to use the same or pretty similar procedures? And we'll do that for participants who have autism.
So, by the way, this is one of the best like replications because they did the exact same thing. So know that if you just change one tiny thing on a research, then it can get published. And look, this one's only like 3 or 4 pages because they're like, you just read the Carroll and Hesse one. You'll get everything that we did, and here's what we found.
There's the same graphs, too.
Yeah, it's even the same graphs. So, like, know that when you're like trying to figure out, you're like, I want to do research in my life. Just exactly copy what someone else did, but change one thing.
Is there a group that wasn't in the original list of participants?
Right?
Let's do this with that
Truthfully,
group.
you only want to change one thing.
I
Yes.
know.
Right?
But like so easy, they literally were like, they didn't even read.
So do you think this would have been published if they then gotten like terrible results, and nobody learned a thing with the mand-tact
Maybe.
procedure?
Depending on how they wrote it up in the
Yeah.
discussions.
A failure to replicate.
Yeah.
If
Oh.
you put that in the title, then people are like, oh. It's not that they didn't do a good job. It's
So title everything "A Failure to Replicate: whatever I actually studied."
Yeah, I
Published
think
like that. It's great.
I think it just depends on how you talk about it. So
Okay.
all results can be publishable depending on how you can spin it in the discussion, right? So
Sure, really scam the system. You know?
yeah, like
Pay off
one
the editor.
limitation is I didn't do it.
you got it, but you have to have it structured well from the beginning.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's
Right?
true.
Like that's really key. So if you don't formulate it right from the start, then
Yeah.
you
So
just end
you
up with a
wanna-
big pile of like crumbling data.
So
at the
replicate
end.
like a good article
Yeah.
that had like a really solid
Yes.
procedure. And
Yes.
you could just copy that thing real easy.
Yep.
So that's
Well, change something.
Would you
you
change
should
the
be
one-
adding to the literature.
yes. You change the one. I mean, you could just replicate for fun.
Yeah,
That's true.
Just
Actually,
to,
you can.
you know, that could be. You
What
wouldn't
did they
publish
do?
that. Oh well, pretty much what we just said. I mean, they extended it with participants who had autism. So, I lost my notes. Okay, so really it was just looking at, okay, well, if we use the mand-tact training, is that going to be faster in terms of sessions for the participants to acquire these tacts? And also, I guess, acquire the mands as well. So the participants were 3 boys with developmental disabilities. So they had autism. They were 3, 15, and 17 years old. They also had 2 typically functioning 3-year-olds in the study. And I don't remember why. It didn't really come up again, but hey.
It didn't actually, and I'm not
They
sure
just sort of
why.
threw them in there. I'm guessing they started with the 3, and then they couldn't get enough kids, or they
Yeah.
realized, no one's going to publish this because it's exactly the same one. So let's add some other students.
Well, this one was done with typically developing.
No, I know, but then so why did they start with the 2 typically functioning
We don't know how they
3-year-olds?
started.
It doesn't mention. I mean, they grouped them differently, but I
Yeah.
don't.
Who knows?
But that didn't
I
really
don't
matter.
know. I
They
think
weren't
it
training
speaks to the
together.
generality of the findings.
Okay, sure. That sounds good.
Okay.
Great. How you spin that discussion, right? So we had the 5 participants. The boys with developmental disabilities could follow some simple and some complex instructions, but they really didn't have a lot of spontaneous vocal verbal behavior. Okay, so that makes them great participants for a study where they would be learning tacts and mands. Almost everybody used this like letter puzzle except for one participant who used various objects just based on his abilities and how he was responding to the stimuli.
I like that one of them was learning Norwegian letters.
They all had Norwegian
Yeah,
letters.
I just like
They
that.
had O with a line through it. Does anyone? I don't know what that's called. What's that? It's like smorgasbord.
I thought you would know.
No, I don't.
It is in that word.
Shop. Remember that? No.
No.
I don't.
Well, it's because the study was conducted in Norway.
That makes sense. Yeah, they would use Norwegian letters in
Yeah.
Norway.
Okay.
That's good.
I'm just sharing that for our audience. They didn't know.
I didn't either, so thank you.
Oh, okay.
I don't always read where. No, I don't always read where the people's university is because it's not relevant. But anyway,
But it was.
I just thought they were looking
This time
for
it was.
symbols that no one would know at first, and then I was like, well, most kids don't know what the O with the line in it is. Whatever. I don't even know what that is. I need that mand-tact training, please.
Anyway.
So we've got our original phase, so kind of the same setup, except they only had the one phase. So they randomly divided their participants. So some of them would be in the tact-only procedure first, and then they do mand-tact training. The other group would vice versa. They had a multi-element design throughout this whole study. The tact-only training, again, very similar to in the Carroll and Hesse. You place an object or letter, depending on the participant, in front of them and say, this is a X. I actually wrote this is an X, like a variable, but they could have done X. I don't remember if that was one of them. What is this? And then if the student didn't say anything, the experimenter would say its name. So X. And then they'd ask again. If they still didn't respond, they'd give, another echoic prompt, and then they'd ask again. And that was pretty much the tact-only training. If they got it right, they got praise and some tokens, which were traded in for something, I suppose. They'd intersperse unrelated tasks exactly like Carroll and Hesse, so like touch your nose, touch your head, so that they had a delay between the presentation of the object and the prompt, and then also so that they could match the pace of reinforcement that the kids in the mand-tact training were receiving. So, yay, that was good. So exactly the same. The mand-tact training, again, very similar to the other study. They'd alternate the trials. So the first, they'd do a mand, and they'd say, find the X, find the whatever it was. And then for the one student, find the object, whatever object it was.
Thermos.
Yeah, to finish something. So they'd finish the puzzle, and then they'd say, find the whatever to the other student. So they were just supposed to be finishing something. Therefore, they assumed that they would want to find whatever letter was missing. I always think that's a bad assumption to make, but it worked out in this case. If the student couldn't find it, they didn't ask for the object, or they didn't do anything, they'd provide an echoic prompt. Then they'd have them ask for the object with the echoic prompt. Then they'd receive the object. Then they'd move into the tact trial, which was the same thing. What is this? And then again, they'd alternate back and forth, until they had, they just kind of do that through 10 consecutive trials. Again, very boring. Sounds very painful to have to go through if you're a student, because you're putting a puzzle together, then it's taken apart and you're given a piece. And then you get the puzzle, put the puzzle together, and take it apart over and over again. And that was sort of it. That's all they did. Same as in the last study. They did look a little bit closer at some of the follow-up. So they, based on practical considerations, they say they took those 12 objects and letters and they put them in a random order and they just put it out in front of the kid. What is this? What is this? What is this? Just to see retention. So they're retending. They did that. So that was the one piece that was a little bit more thorough in terms of they waited a period of time before they did the retention test, rather than like, well, you only have 2 more days left in the semester, so retention test is today. They actually waited a while to see what retention there would be, or whether there'd be a difference. And again, the results were pretty much the same.
Looks good.
Surprise, yeah. So the mand-tact was superior in terms of the the average number of trials to acquire the tacts was superior than just doing tact-only training. And that was true pretty much for all the participants. That was always a lower means to criterion. They also didn't, actually the difference was they did not find any difference in retention though for the students. So they waited a long time, so it might have been just the length of time was the big difference, but there was no benefit in terms of just retention alone. However, since it took less time and you were teaching both mands and tacts, it's really hard to look at these results and say that mand-tact is not the superior of the two types of training that you might do. They talk
Also more fun.
Is it more fun though?
I don't know.
I don't think it's more fun. I think it's more thorough. I don't know if it's more fun. Oh, do like you got your two, your yellow and your blue.
What's your preference? Yeah.
And the kids just push both away.
Who wants to do it?
There you go.
Fine, I'll do it. Okay.
So again, no, that's fine. I mean, really, that's all it was. It was the same results, which, again, you would assume, well, they'll be the same results as pretty much the exact same paper, but with different participants, it is important to know that these were participants with, language delay and a disability. So it's nice to know that the same treatment can be effective with a different population.
These were also older. 2 of the participants were much older, so sort of outside what we think of as that critical window for language acquisition. So they're 15 and 17, and they still saw better results with that group. So I feel like that should be highlighted as well.
That's true.
Do you ever read an article and you get hung up on one sentence? Does this ever happen to you?
That sounds like a Jackie problem, but
no. So on page 420, they say when they're talking about the tact-only training, they say they're trying to slow the tempo, or to a slower tempo of the mand-tact training and trying to match the rate of reinforcement, but they don't actually do that. So they're just trying to.
Yeah, they sort of just did it and
right, but I think wouldn't it be
And
fun
then yoke
to
it.
it would be fun
Yeah.
for them to yoke it. So if you guys want to do another study, I'm like standing here, I was like, what? They just probably were like writing that, right? And I just was like, oh gosh, we should definitely be doing that. So this is one extension that might be interesting, is if you yoke the two procedures together and make sure they actually have the same amount of reinforcement, because I can imagine that they're very different, right? Both in quality and quantity. And that could be the underlying reason why the mand-tact training works more effectively, possibly, right? So we don't know.
We don't know.
So
That's
that
a good point.
a yoking procedure would be really cool.
So would you recommend doing the mand-tact session first and then determining how often the reinforcer was provided there and then yoking the tact?
Yep, and trying
it?
to match the qualitative aspects of the reinforcer of the man. So it may not match
Nice.
exactly right because we're not asking for anything. But if you're going to use a highly preferred item for
Yeah.
a reinforcer in the mand-tact training, we should probably use a highly preferred reinforcer contingent on that response in the tact-only training too. So I like literally read that
You're
sentence.
so smart.
Thank you for like 20 minutes, but I didn't literally over and over again for like 20 minutes. And I was like, what would I do? What would I do? What does this mean? And then I imagined the cows, and I was like, yoked. I usually like, the oxen.
Yeah.
I like to draw what it is. That's how what is it?
Me too.
What does it mean? And then I'm like, oh. And it's my picture of a yoke.
They're yoked.
Yeah. So that's something I think could be a good extension
Yeah.
of this to kind of tease out like why actually it works.
I would also like to point out that the individual that they trained the vocab words with, even from 2002, some of those words seem so archaic now. I have to look at what they are.
Oh, yeah.
They were like newspaper, video, film,
CD.
and CD. Almost none of which do you encounter in like everyday life anymore. And yeast also don't really encounter that. So,
I don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, so that kind of takes us through
I have
our
one more thing.
mand-tact. No, I know we have one more thing.
No, I have one more thing I want to talk
Oh. There's 3 articles. We only talked about 2.
No, I have one more thing that I was thinking about for this article specifically as an extension.
Okay.
What we could do is we could lower the motivation.
You're like on a roll.
I know, because I was thinking a lot in the shower,
The
on
fact
my
that you said it
drive.
on a recording means you've copyrighted all of these ideas
Right?
and no one can use
No,
them.
please, everyone use them. I don't have time to do any of these. Is it might be cool to think about decreasing the motivation during the mand-tact training, and you could also do it that way, right? So maybe not get like a really, really like high preferred tuna salad sandwich, but
Now
maybe
you're talking.
but maybe it could be like a cheese sandwich. So something that's not like you want, but you don't like really want. Like for me, it would be like a vanilla chai from Dunkin' Donuts, which is definitely not as good.
It's like your mid preference.
Yeah, like a
assessment
mid
item.
preference. So not like a lowly preferred, not like a low preferred
Yeah.
item, because then you're less likely to engage in the response. But something that's not like you're not drooling over it, but it's like, yeah, I take it, like chips and Doritos, right?
Or something that you need
You'll
to
always
complete
eat
a
it.
task that you
Yeah.
don't really
Care
care
about.
about, but that you do care
Yeah.
that the task is over.
Right. So I think that would be fun because that's actually real life, right? Like our kids are not like, ooh, I can't wait to find that final puzzle piece. What will it be?
How many times have I done the letter puzzle today? Oh.
Is that an
wait.
ear on Minnie? I don't know, right?
I love man training in arts and crafts. It's like, ooh, don't you want these pom poms and glitter? It's like, I am done with this.
Yeah.
I put 2 on. That's enough.
It's complete.
I can sit here all day. I mean, it's
Well, I still call a lot of tools the whatchamahoo's-it, so I clearly,
That's true.
you need more man-tact training.
I
On
think
your
I've had
tools?
limited mand training with those, so I just don't care.
You're not like, where's
the
that?
EO's low.
So when
Yeah.
you're doing like a project around the house, you wanna
Thingamajigger? Whatchamahoo's-it?
the ratchet wrench.
Yeah.
And then
And
you
I'll
give
take it
it,
away.
Like, good, you do it.
I like that. But yeah, so I was just thinking of various ways that we could extend this research by manipulating the MO and or manipulating the reinforcing quality afterwards.
And we thought this area of research was done.
No.
Mm-mm.
Nope.
See, this is the difference between you research folks and us practical people. I was like, wow, 2 studies that had the same results. Great, I'm going to use that now, and we're done.
That may not always work.
Nope, 2 studies. It's all done.
So
2
Kodak.
data points is a trend.
Yeah, that is true. It's going somewhere.
It's not.
All right, I just need to pause us here. We didn't have a pause in the actual recording, but sorry, listeners. We have to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Do you want to be a BCBA?
Sure, we all do.
Now you can come to Regis College in Weston, Mass. to get your graduate degree.
Choose from any one of these courses.
Masters of Science in Applied Behavior Analysis.
Masters of Science in Special Education.
Dual degree in Special Ed and ABA.
Or be eligible for your postmaster's certificate.
You can complete your degree and be ready to sit for the exam in 2 years. And our 2017 grads had a 100% pass rate on the BACB exam.
Come enjoy practicum placement support, ethics mini handbooks, PhD level professors, small class sizes, and a service trip to Iceland.
If interested, don't delay. Supplies are limited. Learn more at regiscollege.edu.
Again, that's www.regiscollege.edu, regiscollege.edu. One more time, www.regiscollege.edu. See you there!
All right, and we are back. And without further ado, let's get into the recording from Tact. On Tact.
Continue.
Okay. Whew. Remember that time I laughed so hard I cried? That was awesome. I'll tell you why later.
Okay.
Oh, it wasn't related to my...
It was. It was
to
a
my
mental
bone nose?
picture. And it was
Okay.
hilarious.
So we did mand-tact training's done. Close the book.
Yep.
There's no more research
No.
ever to be done. It's the
Never.
best treatment ever. But what else could we do? Jackie, tell us.
Yeah, so Kodak and Clements talked about another way that you can teach mands and tacts if you don't want to put them together. So what they found is sometimes the combination of training procedures may not produce one or both of the verbal operants. And so some things that they had talked about that maybe might work is Beret and colleagues developed an assessment to look specifically at the specific types of mands and how you can then take those types of mands and use a specific training procedure to teach those mands. However, they only specified 3 types of mands, so if you're outside of that boundary, then sorry, like go home. And so Kodak, they like this idea, but they thought, what could we do that's going to be a little easier? And so they were looking back at the research, and they're like, isn't it interesting that a lot of the research that looks at mands and tacts are using echoics as prompts. So they're like, again, super easy. When I read this, I was like, man, why didn't I think about this and do it, publish it?
Should we review what an echoic is?
Yeah, go ahead. Do it, girl.
Oh.
It's a verbal operant.
Yep.
Yep.
That's
That is.
Has point-to-point correspondence.
Oh, yeah, that sounds right.
Yep.
Mhm. Yeah.
Has point-to-point correspondence.
With the preceding
Stimuli.
verbal
Yeah.
Verbal stimuli.
stimulus.
Yes, we
Yep.
did it. I did not write that one down.
That was really good.
And so what they're asking is what we should do if a child fails to acquire a verbal operant during training. And so they wanted to look at how echoic training that precedes a mand-only training and echoic prompting that would precede a tact-only training would work.
Yeah.
Would it,
An
would,
echoic
yeah, would,
training-
Would it work?
would it work?
Would it
And
work?
Right.
I do appreciate any article that starts from a point of failure, of we
Right.
just weren't able to teach tacts and mands, because I'm sure all of you have had that time where you're like, I know how to do man training and it's not working for this student, and
I swear I read the articles. I know I'm not incompetent, and it just doesn't seem to be clicking. And you wonder, what else could I do?
So they were like, okay, here we go.
Or maybe that's just me. I hope it's not just me.
So it wasn't working. So their combination training wasn't working. The student wasn't acquiring either verbal operant. And so they decided to do something different. So there was only one participant within the study. His name is Hal. He was a 4-year-old boy. He did not engage in any functional vocal verbal behavior, but did have a high rate of vocal stereotypy. So he was saying something. It just wasn't functional. And so they ran sessions at his school. And I love that they said one session consisted of 12 trials, and we presented each trial between 10 and 15 seconds apart. So they were very specific about what was happening, which I appreciate because that's very technological. And they could run multiple sessions in a day. So that's important to note. They collected data on correct vocalizations, and the correct vocalizations were for juice, music, and cookie. Those 3. And based on an assessment by Kelly, Schillingsberg, Castro, Addison, LaRue, and Martins in 2007. I've not read that one, but I'm going to. It's an assessment that shows if a target verbal operant or target behavior is a verbal operant. And based on this assessment, it was neither a mand-tact nor an intraverbal. So they thought they could move forward.
Cool.
I know.
Yeah.
It's like,
We
ooh.
can check that one out.
Yeah. So they first did a mand baseline. And so in the mand baseline, they had no access to the item for at least 5 minutes before the session. And then they did what you don't love, where they just held out the item right out of reach. You can see it, and they just waited for 5 seconds. Right? And the kid was probably like, give it to me.
They don't describe if he was trying to grab it or...
Nope.
Yeah.
And then the verbal prompt was, what do you want? So if the child responded with juice, music, or cookie, they had 20 seconds access to the item or a big piece of the cookie, which I love.
I love big pieces of cookie.
I do too. I read that and I was like, yes, I'm doing that. But if he did not respond, there was no consequence here. They may give another prompt, what do you want? And then if he responded after that, then they only got 10-second access with the toy and a small piece of cookie. So there's some differential reinforcement provided right there. I hope it was like all of the cookie and then like a tiny piece of cookie. I think that would be funny.
It would be nice and clear.
Yeah. And so when the man baseline was done, they did man training. And this was similar to baseline, except prior to or within 5 seconds of the verbal prompt, what do you want? The therapist delivered the echoic prompt. So that was, say the item. Say cookie.
Echoic training sounds so fancy.
Yeah.
It's just, say cookie.
And so then if they replied following that prompt, say cookie, then they got whatever they asked for 10 seconds if it was prompted.
They got the small amount.
The smaller amount of whatever it was.
10 seconds with the cookie, and it was yanked out of their mouth.
You're done. So things I was wondering is, I wonder how many times they had to do this. Have you ever done this type of echoic training, and you have to say it multiple times? They don't tell us.
Were you talking in the tact training or in the echoic
No, in the
training?
man training.
Oh, the
so
man
Don't
training.
specify.
They don't
You
specify.
just say 3 times and you're done.
Right.
But
I don't know.
I read it that they just moved on. They held it.
But if they don't
the
say
prompt.
anything in the
they kinda
training,
just-
they don't really tell us. So I was
Yeah.
wondering, how many times did they have to say cookie, say, right? Because that's happened to me before.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know, right? Like you're like, I just want you to say it, but they don't tell us. So that's something I'm wondering about, is if they just did it once, it didn't happen, they moved on, it's a minus, or if they represent.
From the graph, it did seem like the student would always respond.
Right.
It just, the problem was that they wouldn't often respond independently until
Right.
they, proceeded with their.
Right. Clinically, though, we've all been there. I'm like, come on, just say it.
Help me,
right?
help you.
And I also
that's
was
a whole different area
Right.
of research.
That is true.
We could
Yep.
talk about another time.
And another thing I was wondering, which I don't think happened in this study, but I always wonder, is if you say the word say, does then the child say cookie instead of just saying cookie?
Sometimes they do.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes they don't.
So I was just wondering.
And they pointed out like a particular idiosyncratic prompt for him as well that his parents had used.
We'll get there.
Oh, sorry.
We're not there yet. Oh, Diane.
I ruined it.
Oh, you ruined it. So after mand baseline and mand training, they did a tact baseline, which looked exactly the same with the exception of Hal having access to the item for at least 2 minutes, and then they placed it in his hand or on his lap, and he had to say whatever it was, and if he didn't within 5 seconds, they said, "What is it?" And that was the prompt.
Yeah. And there was a difference in the EO here.
Right.
Right? So he had previous access to the item, so presumably the EO would be a lot lower.
Right.
Yeah.
So
in their attempt to control for.
Right. And then in tact training, same. They were given the item, and then he was saying, "What is it?" And then the echoic prompt had to say music, say cookie. Again, I wondered how many times did they have to say that, especially in the tact training, but they don't tell you.
Do you remember their praise statement, Jackie?
Good girl, that's correct.
What? No.
It is in there.
That's not for Hal.
Oh, not for Hal. Oh, that was your other one.
No,
Because
dude,
I
that
laughed.
was No, they went, wow, great job talking.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Which I understand why, because you don't want to label. Great job, whatever the item is. It was just tacted, but still, great job talking.
Great job talking.
You're right.
job. So
That
nice
one
to
was
hear your voice,
that was in the Arntzen one. Good girl. That is correct. Good girl. And I laughed at that. Good girl. And so the echoic training always preceded one of the track trainings in the second, I guess, phase of the study. And the echoic training was just one session of echoic training in which they held the item and had it say music, and then they moved on as soon as they said it. Mm-hmm. So when the item was not present.
Yeah. Well, they did
for the echoic program.
Yeah, they did both of the prompts in that one too. So they'd start with they just say music.
Yep.
And then if
Say
they didn't hear
music.
anything, they'd say
music. Yeah.
But they didn't really care which was right. If it was right, they got access to whatever their high preference item
The big
was.
one.
Yeah.
The big one. They
20 whole
also
seconds.
conducted a preference assessment, and they did something that I liked that the other studies didn't do, is they did provide a highly preferred item following the tact.
And the
in the
echoic.
tact training
Yeah.
and the echoic. So that's something that they didn't do in the other studies. So presumably the
They did
MO
like a
may be the
token.
same.
They mentioned there was token training at the other studies, but they weren't, or at least the Arntzen,
Right, but not this one.
but they didn't specify what it
Right.
has with tokens.
We know that tokens are highly reinforcing
Kids
for
love
everyone.
tokens. Nothing signals that they get to leave
don't.
your work presence like a token.
That's
That's what I
funny.
see. That's, yeah.
So they had the graph is a little funky, but it's kind of fun. So they did a reversal embedded with a multiple baseline design. So the reversal was they had the baseline, and then they did a tact training for the tact training item. Then they did the echoic plus the tact training, and then they reversed back to the tact training.
So fun.
Yeah, and they did the same thing for the item that was a man. So it was interesting that one of them had no mands. They were just looking at tact. The juice, the music was looking at the mands but no tacts. And then the cookie, they started off with the mand, and then they're like, that's not working. And so they changed to a tact.
I didn't understand that. It
So
said
the cookies,
diminished effect as a reinforcer.
that never
What?
happens.
How does that happen?
And how do you know, actually? I was thinking that too. How do you know? The kid was like, no, thank you. I don't want that cookie. That never
Maybe it's
happens.
pushing it away.
Maybe. But
What
I
kind
wish
of
they
cookie
would have
was
told
it?
us. They
Was
didn't
it
tell
chocolate
us.
chip?
I
Was
would
it an
assume
oatmeal
it was a
raisin?
chocolate chip cookie.
Yeah.
What other kind of
See,
cookie
but I would
is
prefer an
there?
oatmeal raisin. So perhaps Hal agrees with me that it's a superior cookie.
I found this the most shocking
I did
piece
too,
of the
actually.
whole study.
I actually had to look
cookie
at.
could lose its reinforcing value.
I didn't understand it initially, and I had to look at the graph and be like, "What? You're not getting the cookie? Like where are you getting the cookie?" And there was none. There was no cookie. So it was very confusing initially for me. But yeah, so what they found is that you guys can all see
I know
these.
it's so tiny. There's no way.
The tiniest of all tiny graphs. Along the x-axis are sessions, and then we see percent vocalizations. Nobody did anything in baseline. Well, Hal didn't do anything in baseline. It's only Hal. And then during the tact training and mand training alone, you see very limited unprompted responses. But once you add that echoic training in, prior to both the mand and tact training, you see an increase almost immediately with the unprompted responses. And I think the nice thing that they liked is that even when you remove that echoic prompt, following the mand and tact training, you saw high levels of responding even after that was gone. So that's what they were excited about.
Now, the results here seem so weird because
I agree.
They were using, it's not like they didn't use any echoics whatsoever, and then they started using echoics, and they're like, wow, this kid didn't spontaneously start saying things that no one was saying. They were using some echoic prompts. It was just the addition of, we're just going to do some echoics right before we get into our tact or our mand training. That sounds like it wouldn't work, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, totally. It doesn't sound like it would work at all.
It's like you already did echoic. You're doing echoic prompts. You're kind of already doing some of the echoic training, right? So don't bother. It's not going to work. And then,
but it does.
No, it
But
did.
it did.
It didn't work as well for juice. I don't know why. And they had two reasons that they gave. I love how they described it. It's like it could have been priming, but it wasn't priming. That's not what it is.
It's like you would have seen it in the first 3 sessions, and you do not. So
no, that's wrong.
Obviously, that was
even.
So I think that probably was like an edit from one of the reviewers. So they were like, address it, but let's pull it away.
But I like that in a discussion.
I do too.
I want them to say this is what it could be, and this is why it is or is not.
I like
think those
that
are
too.
Good discussions because. If you don't put that, I think they just, you get those discussions that kind of ramble on for 2 pages, and you're like, oh, I read this study. How many more pages are left in this article?
Not in this article.
No, this one was brief. But it wasn't, they didn't think it was priming.
Nope.
But what did they think it was?
Prompts.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, they thought maybe it's because there was more prompts. So there was more prompts, then there was more opportunity for correct responding and more opportunity for reinforcement. I think it might have been the prompts. And I think they did a nice job of using highly preferred items as reinforcers. So they don't even talk about that in here. But I think that's another way that it might have worked because they may have evened the playing field out with that mand training and tact training, which they don't talk about probably because they don't have time.
Right. Reinforcement's really powerful.
Sure is.
Whoa, they wrote an article about that one?
Yeah.
It's untapped territory. Reinforcement.
Yeah. One thing they do say is that there's limitation because it's just one little guy.
Just Hal.
Just Hal. And they actually don't know if the mand and tact trainings alone would ever, just with time, they have been acquired. And I like that they give like kind of a sassy answer. They say, during mand training for music following more than 130 sessions. I just like that they added that in because that's like a lot of sessions. Like, it didn't work. So I don't think it would have worked.
Yeah, I know.
That was like your sassy aunt that's like, my casserole is the best, but you can eat some. So, yeah, that's fun.
All right.
So that's another way. Shocking. You could just add this echoic prompting session before your mand and or tact training sessions if your mand-tact training sessions don't work.
Yeah. So now you have 2 ways. 2 ways to teach something. All right. Well, I guess that brings us to dissemination station.
Here we go. I wonder if you didn't know I did it. I do it.
I know. For those of you who are here at the recording, I bet you thought we had some sort of fancy technology.
We're very fancy. It's my mouth.
Or, it's some sort of machine. But nope, it's just all Jackie. She's like that guy from Police Academy who does all the sound effects.
What I want to do next, my third research topic of this, is to do these together. Right? So add an echoic prompting condition before your mand-tact training session and see if it's even faster. Just learn in like 1 minute.
I guess that could be one way.
You don't know, right?
I don't know.
Well,
I love it.
I don't want to get too deep into dissemination station because I want to bring up a special guest.
Bo.
I want to bring up the big cheese himself, Kevin Schlickenmeyer. Kevin, come on up.
Woo!
Join us. The owner operator of Tact, the big boss.
Oh,
Here, you take my seat. I'll stand over here.
That was very loud, so.
Yeah, he never needs a microphone.
See, we say that, but then I'm always the quietest on the recording. I'm like, no, I don't need a mic.
Should we let Kevin say hello?
Yes, please do, Kevin.
Hello.
Tell us about yourself, Kev.
My name is Kevin Schlickenmeyer. I'm the founder and owner of the Autism Community Therapists. Before we get too far, thank you guys. You did an awesome job. I know our
Thanks for
staff
having
loved
us.
it. All smiles over here. I know
Thank
that
you.
people can't see, but there's definitely lots of smiling going
And
on
booing.
Here, so. And booing. They're gonna edit out the boos.
Yeah. If you don't hear booing, it's we edited them. That's fine.
There hasn't been a single boo. You guys did awesome. Thank you so much for being here.
you.
Thanks
It's a
for
great
having us.
opportunity for
It was
us.
super fun.
Definitely.
So do you guys teach tacts here at TACT?
I think we teach a few tacts from time to time at TACT.
It's the one operant they don't teach here at TACT.
There's a sign at the door. It's like no tacts
No tact
allowed.
in here.
Get rid of all those SDs. We don't
You don't
want
like
to occasion
reinforcement
verbal
either.
behavior. Yeah.
No reinforcement. Well, I mean, it does stand to reason, I think, that it can be more challenging to teach tacting than manding, because manding has the built-in reinforcer, the MO is there, and you often get something really good for manding. But tacting, it's like,
You get
No.
nothing really, right?
I can say fanny pack because I see a fanny pack,
We don't always wear fanny packs. It just
I'm
happens
sure.
to be there.
right? But what was the function of my saying fanny pack just then? It was actually because it
I
was
think
funny.
it was a man. I think you want to
It's
bring it
social
home.
reinforcement. You're gonna get or it could be a
Clear
disguised man.
establishing operation in
Right.
place there.
But wait, does it have your name on it? I'm just kidding.
That's
And
Kevin's.
monogrammed.
Fanny pack.
But I didn't really get that much out of saying fanny pack,
Right.
Right? But maybe you did because you're the listener in this scenario. But maybe
Right.
you didn't. I don't really know. But if you're trying to teach someone to tact, it's not. There's nothing built in there, right? It can be a challenge. So I liked these articles for that reason, that they kind of got into some of the ways to do that. But I think that that's the problem you continue to hit up against when you're working on tacting.
Well, one of the cool things is when we learn verbal behavior at first, we think about the functional independence of all the verbal operands. And so we learn that mands are evoked by establishing operations, and that's very distinct from a tact because tacts are evoked by a nonverbal stimulus. Do I have that right? Okay, good. But anyway, so we would be inclined to teach that way. So we'd say, oh, well, a mand should be taught always in the context of an establishing operation. A tact should always be taught in the context of a nonverbal stimulus. But then we learn through our science that, in fact, you can utilize different operants to enhance the teaching effects of others. So we learn, oh my goodness, if you establish a tact in the context of mand training, there may actually be an enhancing effect on our teaching. So on the one hand, we're so conceptual in terms of how we understand the controlling variables, but the way in which those controlling variables are exercised and practiced may be, in fact, very different than what you might presume. So it's very cool.
Whew, that was nice.
Sounded great. Yeah.
It did. I think that's why we love these
Follow up on that.
articles.
I know,
Yeah.
Now, I'm gonna bend down the microphone because I moved for those listening. I have a question, and for those of us who are not, like all you up here, and I might do a study or I might look at this. What would this actually look like to our clients in a way that wasn't just really painful sounding? Like, how many students do you know would tolerate, let's do, 6 to 12 trials where I'm going to have you build a puzzle and I'm going to take it away, I'm going to shove a thing in your face and tell you to label it? How many trials do you think we could get? And if we only got 2 or 3 before the student was just tired of the activity, would we still see such, positive and beneficial results from this treatment? And do we have any ideas how we could make this more fun?
I do.
You don't have to raise your hand, Jackie. You're one of the hosts of the
Oh,
show.
yeah.
You can just
So I thought it might be neat if you're building something and you've taught a student how to build a specific way, like you need to put the legs on first, then the body, then the arm. So there's like I don't know if that's true, but right. So a specific way. And that's how you could teach it, by withholding that specific item so that you're not like taking it away and putting it back, but they're like, where's the leg? And then you give them the leg, right? And they almost put it in. You're like, what is that? Right? So adding it so you have multiple stimuli that you can use without like ruining their lives by taking their toys away.
That's one of the things I see change in teachers when they first start at TACT and then when they become veteran teachers. That, of course, you can establish mands through, I guess, the removal of preferred items and then the representation. So functionally, you've got it all working. But then what I see in the more advanced teachers as their skills grow is that they're able to stay a little bit of ahead. So they're making it fun. So they're kind of contriving establishing operations way ahead of the game. And so that's kind of a neat thing to see in our staff. They kind of learn to stay ahead so that just before the kiddo kind of gets bored of that item, they're already playing with another item and making it look fun, and then the kiddo's kind of moving along. So a lot of the kids here, they come to participate in therapy, and they just think they're coming to play and have a good time. And I think that's something we see in a lot of our teachers who are exceptional at what they do.
That's awesome. And that's the hardest, I think, to do is set up those types of arrangements within an NET or a play kind of setting.
Right.
And really good teachers can do that.
Absolutely.
And you can be observing a situation and it really just looks like play.
Right.
And you're like, what are we going to do next? And the teacher's 3 steps ahead of you. They've already have 3 different arrangements set up around the room, and they know exactly what types of opportunities are going to be available with those toys.
And not only do you have to kind of stay ahead and contrive new establishing operations, there's always a balance between the types of EOs you are trying to teach. So if you're trying to teach a lot of escape-related mands and there's a lot of negative reinforcement going on and those are embedded too much, that may also create that sort of like aversive-like effect where you can become an aversive teacher very quickly if what you're doing is you're trying to establish, new teaching conditions in that way, because then you're kind of just presenting a lot of demands. So I think it's a tough job.
Yeah. But like in this context, if you were working to teach like tacting body parts, which no one really wants to do, right?
True.
Kids do not typically enjoy touch your head, touch your nose, touch your elbow.
Yep.
But perhaps you could set up, like you're saying, Jackie, like multiple exemplars where you have a potato head over here and a paper doll over here and a Lego guy over, and that one didn't work out.
Torso.
Torso.
You have your baster over
here,
there.
right? Exactly. Cradle. And, each one of them is missing the piece that they need, so you're not having to repeat the same thing, have them build it, take it away, put a different piece, but they can move between those different stations and learn to man those items, and then you can build in the tacting opportunities as well. And then the next time they visit them, before the leg was missing on the paper doll, now the arm is missing on the paper doll, and the eye is missing on Mr. Potato Head, etc.
That's the worst.
When the eye's missing?
Yeah, I hate that.
No.
Your angry eyes.
I hate that
both
too.
eyes are gone.
Yeah.
Because it's
terrible.
not just one, it's both. Because they're attached. I've thought about this a lot.
That was really profound.
Thank you.
So would that be, I think that might be kind of the fun extension would be if you were going to more rapidly kind of present different forms of, you've got your 3 stimuli, but it's different legs and different eyes and different hats or different, whatever it was, to see, do you still get the same results? Because it sounds, the way it's described sounds like, oh, of course, that sounds perfect. What a great way, especially if you've been teaching for a while, what a great way to sort of spice up what the sessions look like in a fun way that might decrease the number of trials you need. But again, if you're showing different items each time, does that throw kind of a wrench into the works of, well, now it's going to still take more trials? And then the question becomes, all right, well, it takes more trials again, but now I'm teaching multiple exemplars, so I guess that's a net positive, even though it took longer than the research might suggest. But, these would be the real areas worth looking at, and very practical ones.
And who knows, but that might also be a preferred way of teaching. So if you're a learner and you're seeing lots of new ways about learning about something, so if you did some sort of concurrent chain where in one condition, there's lots of different types of the similar stimuli, and one where they're all kind of like the rules, it's the same as that thing.
Yes.
You could do a concurrent chains and kind of evaluate our kiddos' preference, and then now we're approaching on technologies that are enhancing our kiddos' learning, and they're choosing their interventions and as preferred.
And it would probably be more preferred for parents as well, right?
Absolutely.
And,
Since the
and
main
therapists.
Yeah. Nobody likes to be the same thing every day.
Or
all the
maybe
time.
they do.
Or maybe they do.
And if they do,
That's true.
and they're
Then you
similarly
do that.
effective, then they get to choose anyways.
That's true.
It'd be cool.
Yeah. These are great ideas. I hope someone wrote them all down.
We recorded them, so I suppose. Which verbal operand is that when you record something into a device?
Transcription.
Would that still be
I
transcription
think
if I'm
so.
recording it
You
on a
record
device?
it, and then we have to write it down later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the transcription.
What?
Yeah, sorry.
Audio to text.
Yeah.
I mean, I got my 4 verbal operands, and then it's kind of vague after that.
I'm proud of myself for
All
knowing
right.
that, though.
Good job.
Thank you.
Winning.
Well, we definitely want to say thank you so much, Kevin, for having us.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you, all of you, for listening and being such great listeners. We really enjoyed being here, and we hope you enjoyed listening to us talk about tacting for y'all. That's all we got. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Kevin.
We want to thank everyone at Tact so very, very much for their gracious listening to us recording. It was really, really great to be out there to meet so many fabulous people. And a big thank you to Kevin Schlickenmeyer for inviting us and having the idea for us to come out. We were so touched. We were so honored, and it was a lot of fun. And we really hope to get to do some more of these live recordings again, because it is a real treat to get to actually see the people we're talking to. You know, it's easy to make each other laugh when we're doing these recordings, because when we're able to do it in front of other people and to get to see their real reactions and get that feedback, it is just amazing. It is just it's a different atmosphere. It's a lot of fun. So thanks again to Kevin and all his crew. And we also want to thank all of you for listening to the show, whether you are a returning listener or a brand new listener. We really hope you enjoyed ABA Inside Track. Why not leave us some feedback on iTunes, either by subscribing, by leaving us a review. You can also find us pretty much anywhere. If you'd like to subscribe to us, we're on Spotify, on Stitcher. You can find us on YouTube, where these episodes come out with subtitles. You can go to our website, abainsidetrack.com, to see postings and to get CEs for these episodes. We're on social media as ABA Inside Track, whether Instagram or Facebook or Twitter. And of course, you can always email us with episode suggestions, feedback, comments, or your own thoughts on the research at abainsidetrack@gmail.com. We'll be back next week with another full-length episode, all chock-a-block full of research. But until then, keep responding. Bye!